Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome, dorks, nerds, bookworms, and first-time viewers to the Books by Adrian author platform and our flagship show, Livestream Sunday. If you are new, my name is Adrian Santiago. Welcome. Hello. This is my channel, and this is my show. And normally we do interviews on this show, but today we're doing more of a kind of roundtable discussion type scenario, and we have some really great guests to join us for this. So right off the bat, I want to remind everybody to take a second to go ahead and leave a like on the video. If you are not yet subscribed, please do so now. The chat is no longer subscribers only because I think it was the source of my trouble between StreamYard and YouTube last time. So I've turned that off for now until I can figure that out. But anyone can hop into the chat, so welcome, join us all, but please do subscribe and hit that notification bell. For when I drop videos, I have the podcast for the guests on this show coming up later this week on Thursday. The video drops at 11 a.m. on this channel, and the audio versions are available that same morning, like as of midnight. Thursday, you got the audio version. All right, so on today's show, we have two guests. Claerie Kavanaugh is the author of Fractured Fairy Tale series, as well as the Lisa's. I don't know if it's Lisa's or Lisa's. I have to ask her. I didn't have time to ask her. Lisa's Holiday Hijinks series. Adam Gaffen is the author of the Cassidy Chronicles series, which I really, really want to talk to him about. And they're joining us today to talk about the writing of a series of novels. So I'm going to go ahead and get right into it. I'm going to first introduce Claerie Kavanaugh to everybody. Let's welcome her to the live.
Hey,
Claire?
that's
Hi.
a really cool animation. I didn't have time to see that while we were prepping. for
Oh yeah,
stuff.
no,
That's
I'm full
awesome.
of surprises. There's more on the way. Don't even worry about it. Why don't you go ahead and take a second, introduce yourself to the audience. Let us know who you are, where you're from, and what kind of stuff you do.
Okay, cool. So hi everyone. I'm Claerie Kavanaugh. I also go by CJ Kavanaugh. I am a young adult and middle grade contemporary author. I currently have 4 books and a coloring book out. The third book the 3 of those books are in the Lissa's Holiday Hijinks series, and 2 are in the Fractured Fairy Tale series. It's actually pronounced Lissa because the character's full name is Alyssa, but everybody calls her Lissa for short, just in case you were wondering about that, Adrian. And then aside from that, I just got represented by a talent agency not too long ago, so I've started to do some sort of modeling and acting, that type of work on the side as well. I'm from St. Louis, and I'm mostly active on Instagram, which you'll be able to find down below, along with all the other links to my stuff if you want to follow me.
All right, thank you very much. That was awesome. Very well done. How many times have you done this before? You're really good at it.
Just a couple, but I enjoy being on stuff like this. I like doing shows and podcasts and just having conversation with other authors. So
Right on. Me too. Let's welcome our next guest, Adam Gaff. Adam, welcome to Books by Adrian, buddy. How you doing?
Great. How are you today?
We're doing good. As the audience can tell, we're having a little bit of a lag between us and Adam, so let's allow that. I was saying to him earlier, I don't know if it's a storm outside my window or the mountains outside his, but Adam, why don't you go ahead and take a second and introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. It's great to be here. My name's Adam Gaffin. I am the author of the Cassidy Chronicles series. There are currently 5 novels in the series, plus a serial out on the Kindle Vella, and a number of short stories out there as well. It's a science fiction. It's adult, but anybody from probably teenager on up can read it. My links are down below. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, may be able to find me on Twitter, and you can also find me on my website. And thrilled to be here. Love talking to other authors as well. And mountains outside. I live in southern Colorado, so there are mountains. There's one 5.5 miles away, right out the window.
I was telling you before the show, that's Colorado's my dream. I keep trying to plan like a big family vacation out to Colorado to get my wife to fall in love with it, so we can finally just move there because it's where I want to be. But anyway,
My mom has been trying to convince us to take a family vacation to Colorado for so long, and I'm just like, wheelchairs and rocks. Not really a good mix. 'Cause you
there
probably
would be a
can't,
lot of pauses for
yeah,
lifting. Yeah,
probably can't
definitely.
tell on camera, but I am in a wheelchair, so like, I prefer cities, but it's really beautiful up there from what I've heard.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for is the scenery out there, man. The forests, the mountains, the rivers, the lakes. That's what I'm all about.
Well, I'm way down in southern Colorado, which means the mountains are a little ways away. It's right on the edge of the high prairie, and it's pretty flat out here. Because we're so far south, it's up in the 80s today, and here it is, starting to get to late September. It's beautiful, and I see from the comments that Penumbra Mine is also in southern Colorado, and thank you very much for the comment about the walls and the woodwork.
I'm throwing up some of the chat on the screen here, just scrolling through it. All the
You always wanted
hellos,
to
all the
create a coloring book,
coincidences.
yeah.
Alyssa, yeah.
How cool is that? Yeah, I don't even know where the name came from. It was the first
Sometimes
thing
that's
I
how it
wanted to
is.
call
Yeah.
her, and she just showed up in my brain. And then I found out that a friend of ours actually has a niece who looks exactly like the character. I wish I had a picture of
Oh
her so
man.
I could show you guys, but it was just such a funny coincidence.
It's
Um,
sometimes the name like spawns the character, doesn't it? Like you just
It
know what
does.
you want to name it and everything comes out of that. I have several characters that are like that. And then I have others where I had to really, really search for a name, you know?
Yeah.
So I am so very excited to see so many people in the chat. This is going to be a fun one. Let's go ahead and kick off today's topic now. We're talking about writing series. All of us are writing a series and we're at very different stages. I have not yet put out the first book, while you folks have quite a few under your belts. So first off, my congratulations to both of you on all of your success, all of your books. I long for the day that my book is on a shelf in a bookstore. I dream about it. So I can only imagine what it's like to have that high, that ride a couple of times under your belt now. We're writing series. What was it about writing a series for each of you? Like, why are you writing a series? Why did it have to be a series?
Do you want to go first, Adam? Or-
I'm sorry, I should be more
Sure.
direct. In fact, just because of that, Claerie, you're going to go first.
Absolutely.
Oh, I
Yes,
see. You're
ladies
gonna
first.
Ladies first. Ladies first.
you're gonna put
Absolutely.
me on the spot because I
Cheers, by
have
the
not
way,
seen.
to a great
All
show.
right. Okay, that's fine. So I didn't really have, and I think this is where you might be a little smarter than me, Adrian, because I don't know how far you are in the
I don't know
process
about
of like
that.
writing the series, but I didn't actually plan for the series that I'm working on to become a series. I found a throwaway line in a completely different book of mine that I'm not even advertising right now because it doesn't have anything to do with either of the series I'm working on. Um, a- and it happened to be about a ghost that was supposed to be haunting a ballet school. And I'm like, oh, that would make a really fun Halloween book. And this was in the middle of the pandemic, of course. So it was like March or April of the pandemic. And I was just like, I've never really written a middle grade book before. This would make a really fun middle grade story if I wrote a ghost story in a ballet school because I used to do a lot of theater as a kid. And I wrote the first 20,000 words in about like 2 or 3 weeks. And then, like, after that, my brain just kept going, I want you to do more with this character. Like, this is now going to be like a holiday for, or like a book for each holiday. And so it just sort of spiraled out of, I just kept getting all of these ideas for different things I could do. I didn't really have a set plan to turn it into a series, but I'm
Yeah,
having a lot
it
of
just
fun
kind
with
of gets
it.
away from you, doesn't it? It just becomes its own thing and
Yeah.
keeps going. Yeah, yeah. What about you, Adam?
Mine's similar in that the the books weren't supposed to be a series at all. The original book, the Cassidy Chronicles, was supposed to be 4 novellas, and I was going to put them together as a box set. And there you go, tell the whole story of Ayana and Kendra, and be done with it. Unfortunately, it was 7 years between when I wrote the second novella and when I finally got around to writing the third part. Never ended up writing the fourth. Yeah, never ended up writing the fourth part because I couldn't split the third part into two pieces and ended up just squishing it all together into one single novel. And again, I thought, okay, I'm done. If you get a copy of that book, at the end of it, it has the epilogue with the kind of what happened next for all the major characters. Yeah, so then I started to write whatever was going to be next, and I came up with this really neat idea, this really neat crisis that needed to be solved. Unfortunately, the rest of the world around it, I couldn't visualize it. I couldn't get it together. And I'm sitting there basically bouncing my head off the keyboard and thought, what if I take this scenario and drop it into their world, 5 years later, 6 years later, it was all a little bit fuzzy at the beginning. And all of a sudden, the problems were solved. I had the world that this crisis happened. And now I started writing the second book. So the second through fifth books of the series were actually planned. I knew that was going to be a story arc. I knew that was going to be, a series from the second to fifth. It was just there weren't supposed to be a second through fifth. It was just supposed to be the first one.
Yeah. For me, it all spawned out of like a single short story. I wrote a short story that was based off an experience that I had, but I don't like writing about myself. I don't keep a journal. I don't know, like I can't do it. So I wrote it as a piece of fiction. I just needed to share this experience, So I wrote it as a piece of fiction, and by the time I was done writing that short story, I was like, this is actually the prologue to a bigger book. Like, this is the start of a novel. So then I started writing that, and probably halfway through the outlining process, I was like, this is like 3 novels. And then so before I had even really started my first draft, I knew that I was going for at least a trilogy. And nowadays I'm even toying with the idea of like short stories in between the novels, like a short story collection for different histories and lores and stuff, because I just created this crazy huge world, like, because I guess I have to write a novel.
Isn't
So
it crazy how that happens though?
Yeah, it like snowballs. It's like this thing that you just can't stop it. It was just meant to happen. You got to write this book, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like that. Not always, but sometimes it's like that. Let me see here. When I began writing my first book, the story just kept growing, and I knew it would be a trilogy. Yeah, see, sometimes you just know that,
Classic.
right? Like, and that's the thing is like, you
Debut
know,
Nona.
yeah, as you and Alex discussed the other week, but then it kept going. I think it was because I created such a comprehensive world. Yeah, as you know, as far as people's debut novels, there are certain rules
Yeah.
that you're not supposed to break, and one of them is don't do a series as your first book. And I'm like, it's a trilogy. You know, another one is like don't do a giant epic for your first book, and I'm like, 200,000
Yeah.
words.
But I
Don't do
also
more
feel
than one
like,
main character, three main characters.
I mean, that probably depends if you want to go for traditional publishing or if you want to self-publish, though, right? Because if you
Self-publishing, yeah,
self-publish, you can do whatever the
whatever you
heck
want.
you want
Yeah.
as long as
Well,
you
see,
find
that's
an
the thing.
audience
Those
for
rules,
it.
people think that those rules are there for you to sell in the traditional market, but honestly, I really do feel that it's actually heartfelt advice from other authors for new authors, just because there are certain pitfalls that are very, very easy to
Mm.
fall into in those things when you're doing your first book. You would ideally want your first book to be a standalone thing that you can later just kind of be like, okay, maybe that didn't happen because that's my worst book ever. And let's, you know, maybe my catalog starts in the second book where I actually know what I'm doing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, just kind of George Lucas it and like wave a magic wand, make it go away. Like the Christmas special.
That's something that I kind of inadvertently did with that first volume because it serves as a prequel to the rest of the series.
Nice.
It can stand alone. You know, you can read that and be done. You know, and you're fine. Or you can start with the second book in the series, and you can start right there.
Yeah.
And read the other four, and that all ties together. So there are kind of two starting points for people to get into this universe. I like Aphrodite's comment about breaking the rules on purpose.
Yes. You have to know
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
rules to break the rules, but you can break them.
Yeah.
Although I will agree that like the first book that I ever wrote, which will never see the light of day, like it is its own standalone thing, and that's kind of also what I like about the types of series I write is they all like feature the same characters or they take place in the same universe, but they're their own story. So if I decide like, oh, this book kind of sucks, and I maybe don't want people to know about it as much, it's not gonna ruin the series arc. You know what I mean? If I kind of just sweep it under the rug and don't let people know that it's there.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. Well, I think that this hashtag kind of sums that up. No words left behind. I almost want to get that tattooed. That's so like poignant. That's exactly how I feel. No words left behind. I mean, like I said, I'm at like 200K for this first novel. It's bananas, and I'm trying to get the word count down because you know editors charge a lot. It's
Well,
crazy.
yeah.
So
Speaking as an editor, yeah, we do charge a
yeah,
lot, but
yeah. She admits it.
yes, I will admit it. I mean, but I don't
But
know. I
there's
mean,
value.
there's also the potential to take that 200K though and like split it up into a bunch of novellas like Adam did, and
It's
then
a good
you've
idea.
got 4 times or 3 times or 2 times more content that you can like start to market and do stuff with.
You know, that's not a bad idea because I do have three main characters. I can definitely divide it up into like three little books. But I don't want to do that. I want it to be a big, beautiful novel. I just love a nice, big, giant hardcover you can put up on the shelf. It's heavy, and you're like, yeah, this is going to take me like a month to read. It's going to be awesome. You just like dive in. That's
True.
That's what I like to read, so that's what I'm writing. You know what I mean? Like I pick up George Martin books for fun, and I'm like, oh, light reading, let's go. It's
I just think I admire you because I've been sitting with the book that I'm currently working on, which advice for new people out there, do not put a book on pre-order that you have not finished the rough draft of yet because it will drive you crazy. Do not do what I did.
you break the rules, and then you tell everybody else not to break the rules, right?
I've been working on the same book for it seems like forever, and I still really love the story, but there's something about being able to like finish a book in a decent amount of words that just feels like a sense of accomplishment that I don't know if I could get if I was writing a 200 word like epic
Mm-hmm.
thing. What about you, Adam? Like, why did you decide I'm gonna do 4 smaller books instead of I'm gonna write a book?
It was a very calculated decision. It was, okay, I want to have these accessible. I want to have people, because they're novellas. I was thinking, okay, I'll price them all at 99 cents. Get people buy one. If they like the first one, they're much more likely to buy the rest of them, and I want them to buy the rest of them. So it was a marketing decision. It was a marketing strategy to do it that way. And if you actually go and look up the Cassidy Chronicles, from online, they are still out there. The three shorter works that go into the long volume 1, you can still get those separately. They were out there from the first 2 were out there from 2012 on. So I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna take them down. I'm not, I've got a lot of work put into them. They all have separate covers. They have covers that are unique to each other, and so they're still out there. They serve really well. And again, this is coming from the indie author side of it and having to do all your marketing. Here you go. Here's a novella. This starts the story. Here you go. The first one's free. Enjoy.
Yeah.
And then, oh, by the way, there's another 600,000 words after this.
If you like it and you want to, dive in, here we go.
Yeah.
Can each of you introduce us to your series, like elevator pitch the series? Adam, why don't you go ahead and just introduce us to Cassidy Chronicles, and then Claerie can follow.
Sure. Cassidy Chronicles follow Ayanna and Kendra Cassidy, a married couple, although they're not married at the beginning of the book. The first book starts at their wedding, and the minister decides to take a shot and try to assassinate Ayanna at her wedding, and they take off running.
Whoa.
And the book the book goes from there. The first one is all about them trying to figure out why he just did this, why he tried to kill them. And
that rat bastard.
It's a hell of a ride. Yeah, it's a hell of a ride, and things are not what they look like at first. The second book, and the one that really gets into what I call the Artemis War, is 5 years later, and they've settled down. They have a family, and they're pursuing their dreams. And the government, the United Earth government, comes to them and says, "We've got this little problem we think you can help us out with," and that gets them going on the second one.
Right on. What about you, Claerie?
So mine is, I'm actually still working on a pitch for the series as a whole because it follows a girl named Alyssa Clarkin, and she is kind of slowly discovering that she's a witch, kind of. I mean, she's not actually a witch, but she so happens to come in contact with a lot of magical objects. And the first one is not an object so much as it's a werewolf. Well, her family is on a summer camping trip before school starts, and she has to figure out how to get the werewolf back home to its family because it's lost. And then she just, throughout her adventures, she gets stronger and stronger at using the magical items that she comes in contact with. And it's really a series that I wrote to teach kids lessons about family and about being themselves and about not giving up and things like that. But I wanted all the stories to have sort of a fantastical element to them because they're primarily fantasy stories that have LGBTQ elements in them. And I kind of started writing them because I was like, this is the media that I needed as a kid, as a, as a person in the LGBTQ community who didn't figure that out until I was like 24 because I didn't see myself in uh, the media a lot. But I was like, well, I don't want the story to focus on that. I still want it to be a wholesome, fun adventure for kids. And I figured what better way to set up adventures than around holidays because every kid loves the holidays.
I love it. And the is it Fractured Fantasies where you like do like adaptations
Oh,
of
fractured fairy tales. I don't even,
Fractured Fairy Tales,
to
excuse
be
me.
honest, I've changed the first word at the beginning of that series name so many times. I don't even remember what I have it
Like what it is
as
now.
in like on my website or anything. Um, I only have 2 books in that series at the moment, the first book and the coloring book. I do intend to go back to it. After I finish Alyssa's series, I'm 3 books deep into what's going to be a 6-book arc. And then I'm going to
Nice.
go back to the fairy tale series. But
Beautiful.
the cool thing about that is that the fairy tale books, because they're adaptations, they also stand alone. So I don't have people that are waiting for like you left me on a cliffhanger and you haven't come out with a new fairy tale
Yeah.
book in a year and a half. What gives? you know,
Yeah,
you
that's
know.
good. Yeah. See,
So,
with me knowing that one of the rules is don't do a series for your first one, I very intentionally try to make each one as standalone as possible. Obviously, they're part of a trilogy, they're part of a series. You expect people to read them in order, but you got to make them so that if anybody accidentally picks up book 2, it still stands alone as its own book and they shouldn't be lost. So
yeah.
one of the things that I do in order to sort of facilitate that in my writing is I do a big time jump in between each book so that every character is at a fresh new starting point for every reader, regardless of first time or returning reader. That way, every book should stand on their own. It all has its own starting point, and anything that you need to know from the past can be inferred in the writing as you normally would in the first book. Whatever you're doing, whether it's flashbacks or just exposition, whatever. You you can make it so that the series feels like 3 standalone books. I always look to the Dark Knight as that because it's just this beautiful standalone movie in the middle of a trilogy. The first one obviously you can watch fresh. The third one you can't watch unless you watch the other 2.
Mm.
It builds off the other, but that second one in the middle, anyone can just dive into the Dark Knight and watch it all by itself, and that's kind of where I'm coming from with that. My series is a sci-fi fantasy series, and the first book is a murder mystery. So there's a futuristic moon-size space station called the Spark, where everybody lives. The last of humanity lives there, and this space station kind of orbits a planet that doesn't have a moon of its own. So we kind of gave it a moon and made it our home. The planet itself is a fantasy planet full of fantasy creatures and races and magic and all kinds of stuff. But up on the Spark, it's a sci-fi world. You have technology and everything. It's humans, who have no magic doing this. And so the themes between the two are going to sort of play out throughout the series. The first book is way more on the Spark, so it's way more sci-fi with little hints of fantasy.
Mm.
The second book will have two major storylines, one on each side of things, and then the third one is where everything collides and explodes and everybody dies and stuff.
Awesome.
Let me see here. So, do you guys have like rules over like what genres you write and don't write? I know that your book, Claerie, is very kind of fantasy. Adam, yours sounds a lot more sci-fi. Any genres you guys don't touch or anything like that? Whatever.
Oh, I've dabbled in I've dabbled in military adventure. I've dabbled in mystery and horror. I'm not much for the over-the-top romance.
Mm.
I mean, there are relationships in all of my books, and one of
Same.
the consistent themes through my books are these developing relationships as they go along. There are, let's see, during the course of the 5 books, there are 3 weddings.
Wow.
But they're not, they're not front and center. I mean, my big thing with the characters in my books is that life is happening outside of what you see in the books.
Yeah.
Things are going on,
Yeah.
which aren't part of the focus, and they just kind of occasionally weave their way in and out. So romance is something that I'm not going to really write
like a straight up romance. Like, yeah, you're not gonna write like a straight up two people falling in love is the premise of the entire novel kind of book.
Yeah, and much as my wife especially is a steampunk fan,
Nice.
I just can't quite wrap my mind around that kind of fantastical element in steampunk. I can't quite reconcile it. So it's like, okay, maybe someday, but for right now, no.
Yeah, there's something kind of cyberpunky about the second novel. Like the sci-fi side of things goes way more into like the cyberpunk side of things in that second one. But the first one is pretty like, you're comfortable sci-fi. I'm trying to like lure people in and then hit them with a sledgehammer later. What about you,
Yeah.
Claerie?
I'll try anything once except for horror. Horror is the one thing that I will not touch with a 10-foot pole. Because I think it takes a lot of skill to do it well, and B, because I just don't like horror. It's just not I don't like horror, any horror. I don't like to watch horror movies. I don't like consuming horror media. It's just not my realm of expertise and not really anything I want to dive into. Everything else, well, the only other thing would be like really hard sci-fi, like the alien type of stuff. That's it's. I like sci-fi mixed with fantasy.
Yeah,
I'm not much of a
me
straight
too.
sci-fi person. That
Yeah,
that
I always
doesn't.
tell people Star Wars is a sci-fi fantasy. Like, you got wizards who move
Absolutely.
things with their minds and that, and it's a sci-fi fantasy. It has magic and stuff in
Yeah.
it. So like you gotta realize that that's a very real and a very popular subgenre is the sci-fi fantasy sort of hybrid, which is where I'm coming from. Question for Clary: do you have hard or soft magic systems?
Honestly, it depends on the book. So far in this series, the magic systems have been relatively soft, but like based on general knowledge that I feel like everybody knows about the creature that, or the magical creature that I choose to work with for that book. So most of my books are based around a holiday, and then they have a magical creature that somehow relates to that holiday. So I chose a ghost for the Halloween book, for example. So I was like, okay, I'm a sucker for the unfinished business trope. I don't know why I like that trope so much, but it's something I was like, if I'm gonna write a ghost story, I have to put the unfinished business trope in there because it's fun. And so I've just been like, okay, everybody knows that ghosts stick around if they have unfinished business. Everybody knows people genuinely or generally can't see ghosts. So how can my main character see ghosts? And like just
Mhm.
like taking basics of like what's the general understanding of this creature and the magic that happens at the time of this holiday, and then just sort of spinning it to fit my story is kind of
Yeah,
what I've been
almost
doing.
almost very Christopher Nolan of you to like sort of kind of look at the real world explanation for such a fantastical thing occurring and then just sort of letting it spin out of that. Very, very nice. I
Thanks.
wanted to be the first one to answer this next question. How do you manage readers trying to read a later book without reading the first? I was talking a little bit about that earlier in putting time jumps in between the books. Um, when David Hopkins was on the show last week, he was on the podcast. You guys can check that out on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. You can see it on the channel. He was talking about in comics how Stan Lee's mandate when he was editor in chief is that every comic book is somebody's first comic book. Somebody somewhere has never read a comic book before, and they're gonna pick one up at random, and it's gonna be this one. Like every single comic book is somebody's first. So you have to make it accessible to everyone from the jump. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from with that big time jump is when you're reading a first novel with no prior work before it, um, you are diving into characters you've never met before, a world you've never stepped into before, and it works because the author is revealing things to you at a certain pace. He's letting you in on things that happened before. He's foreshadowing things that are coming up. And so you just do exactly what you would for a first novel in a series, but you just do it for each one. And so for my second book, it's very important to me that anybody can pick it up and get a full and complete story, beginning, middle, and end in that one. The other thing that I do to kind of help with that is I put a prologue and an epilogue at the in each one. And I do that not just because I love prologues and epilogues and I think they're awesome and underrated, but I do it because the main, like, you're gonna have people that skip those. I've met those people. They don't read prologues, they don't read
Mm-hmm.
epilogues. They just read the chapters that have numbers attached to them. So you make those chapters completely self-contained, and then you have the prologue is foreshadowing everything in the series. The epilogue is setting up what's coming up next in the next book, and you just keep that up in each one. And that's how I do it anyway. What do you guys think? Do you guys think about that when you're writing your novels? What if somebody picks up my second book first or my third book
Mm.
first?
I guess I'll go first this time.
Oh,
I was
yeah,
like,
just round
did you
table.
wanna?
Just go for
Um,
it.
yeah. Okay. So first of all, I was about to say something snarky about the prologue and epilogue thing, because as someone who works as a developmental editor at my day job, I'm always like, no, no
Yeah,
prologue.
yeah.
Why?
I know. I know.
But then you said the thing in the middle is still complete, and I the fact that you're aware of the fact that people are gonna skip that stuff and you use that to your advantage, I think is very smart, because a lot of people don't do that. They use the prologue and epilogue to just like, I'm gonna dump a lot of history on you that then
History, exposition.
isn't
Yeah.
really relevant. Um, but as for like how I do it, in this series in particular, it's been interesting because, as I said, the first book that I wrote was the Halloween book that just came out last week. Yes, last week. My time is still messed up. But the first book that came out, I actually wrote after the Halloween book in March of this year, and it came out in July. And so keeping the continuity, like, because all of the books are meant to take place, like, this happens in the same year to the same characters, keeping the character growth going while continuing to make sure each story is a complete story on its own has been a unique challenge that I didn't really anticipate when I decided to turn this into a series. Usually what I do though is kind of like what you said, Adrian. I just make sure that each of the books from chapter 1 to the last chapter is a complete story. And I think I admit that I kind of took the easy way out because each of my books sort of starts over with a new holiday and a new mythical creature. So it's like at the end of each book, the previous mythical creature isn't like gone, but like they're gone from the need to see them in the series again, with the exception of actually the book that I'm writing right now, which kind of spoiler for the rest of the series, but not really. So yeah, it's been, I usually just try to think of plots that will fit into a singular book, and then if I carry on into series, I usually carry the same characters. I would find it very difficult to do the things that Adam is doing, where you write a series where it's like, okay, this builds on this, would build on this, which is like you almost have to read them in order, it sounds like, except the prequel book, in order for it to make sense. Unless I'm wrong, Adam.
You're not wrong, but you're also not entirely right. So yeah, the first volume can stand on its own, but the second, third, and fourth volumes, you could pick up a book, any one of those, and be fine going forward. And because I've written enough of the backstory in the beginnings of those books, in the first 10 or 12 chapters, to ground you in the universe and let you know what's been going on, and who these people are and how they relate to each other. The exception to that is the fifth one, the one that just came out last month, and that's because it picks up. It starts as the fourth book ends. I mean, there is no gap in time between when those two books happen. So there's a big jump in space. You jump, 16 light years from the last scene in the fourth book to the first scene in the fifth book. But they're happening at the same time. So that is the one book that you cannot pick up and fully, just read it and say, "Oh, okay, well that was good." As for epilogues and prologues, I use them as, not all of my books have them, and what I use them for is to add little nuggets of story that, if you read them, it adds to the overall, the overall arc. But on the other hand, if you don't read them, you're not going to lose anything crucial. Yeah. Because, like Adrian said, I know that there are people who don't read them. And so, if somebody reads them, great. They have some extra information. They have a little bit of a character sketch, and none of them feature any of the main characters. I mean, they're all side characters, very, or minor characters. One of the books, Road to the Stars, the second book, actually starts, the prologue are 3 fake news articles, which kind of give a little bit of a history of the Artemis colony, which is the main antagonist.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I think I saw a comment here. I think
Let me know which one. I have a couple that I've been waiting to throw back up. Yeah. The one
Helen
from
said,
Helen. I got it right
yeah.
here. My trilogy
Helen
needs to
said, my
be read in order
yeah.
to be fully appreciated. Though I tried to give an intro / context to each character so the reader has some context, but they are connected. Yeah, exactly. You plan for people who read it out of order, but you hope for people who read it in
To
order,
read it
and
in order. Yeah.
you make
Yep.
both work. Yeah, yeah, for sure. What were you
Yeah.
gonna say about that, Clary?
I was just gonna say that I think that right there is why people tell a new writer don't write a series as your debut,
Yeah,
because most people when they write a series, I did this when I was first starting to write. Again, never seen the light of day, but like I didn't have enough knowledge of story structure to like know how to do a complete story in a single book and then also have like a bigger arc at the same time. And I think it's a hard thing to understand when you're a new writer and you haven't been like studying the craft as long. So that might be why people say just like focus on a single book. It's not just about focus on the single book, it's about get used to the craft, figure out how to tell a good story in your genre, figure out what people expect from you, and then you can break the rules like we've been saying this whole time.
yeah. Well, they said earlier in the chat that as long as you know that you're breaking the rules and you're doing it on purpose, you should be okay. And I kind of subscribe to that. Where like obviously, ideally, you want to have some experience under your belt and putting out novels before you start breaking these rules. Yes, of course, but if you're familiar enough with why the rules are in place and you've been writing, whether you've been publishing or not, if you've been writing for years and you kind of know like okay, I'm going to try and do it this way, that I feel that's very different and could be what makes something very fresh and new. I mean, think about how many rules the Matrix, the first Matrix movie, made. How many rules it broke to be as special as it was, that it still holds up to this day. I mean, things like that. I want to welcome Nat Nicholton to the chat and to the channel. Nat subscribed, so I'm really excited. So question for both writers: what is your favorite or most recommended craft book? So on writing, I'm guessing, not necessarily watercolors.
Hmm. Um, for me, it's a toss up between all of the emotional thesaurus series of books because those have been super invaluable to me when I'm trying to describe things that I haven't been in the middle of, or like I have to come up with a new way to say like this character is super nervous, but I've used these same expressions a million times over. So that's been really helpful in terms of like a book to have next to you while you're writing the book. But like I think I'm gonna be really cliche here as far as the authors on YouTube go because everybody says this, but I honestly think it's gonna be Save the Cat. Um, particularly Save the
Nothing
Cat
wrong with that.
writes a novel instead of because the script version is good, but the novel one is better because it specifically applies to authors, and it's the closest I've seen to a book that explores the 3-act writing structure, which is the structure that I prefer to plot with. It's not the 3-act writing structure, but it takes a lot of its inspiration from how people write a movie. And that's what I always try to explain to my students is that you have to forget that you're writing a book
Mm-hmm.
and think about it as if people were watching it. If the scene in your brain is not going to be interesting to watch on a screen, it doesn't need to go in the book.
It won't be interesting in your brain either. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I try to write as cinematically as possible. I'm trying to create visual images in your brain. Um, it's funny because You know, when I first started writing, I would go way too heavy into the descriptions and actions of a story, and my dialogue would greatly suffer. And everyone who would read my stuff would tell me, "Yeah, but you know, you got to work on your dialogue, man." And then I worked on my dialogue so hard that now, like, I mostly write dialogue, and my descriptions and actions are very vague. And folks are like, "Dude, you got to give me some more description of what's going on here," because I'm like, "Okay, okay, I got to balance it. I got to balance it." So it's
It's a
interesting how we can
whole,
go through phases like that as authors as well, where like even what you're good at kind of changes. You know what I mean? And what you're bad at changes.
yeah,
Sorry, Adam, what were you saying?
yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, for craft books,
Yes.
my two are, I kind of go old school, and you'll have to forgive the cat if he's between me and the computer at the moment. Is Stephen King on writing,
Nice.
and go way old school. Elements of Style, Strunk and White. It's absolutely. Oh yeah, but I mean the advice that they give is still valid today. It's still solid. You know, this is how you write well. To Adrian's point about the to Adrian's point about the cinematic, yes. To Adrian's point about the cinematic, I mean, all my books, it's kind of a holdover from that very first one, which was supposed to be novellas. All of my books are subdivided into at least 3 sections. The last one is divided into 4, and each section has its own title, which kind of gives you the theme for that book within the volume.
I like this comment from Nat, but there are also authors who try to write too movie-like and only describe the visuals, but forget smell, sound, taste, feelings. You lose all that in a movie, and that's a good point because there are. See, when I recommend to people to look to movies in order to plot their novel, I'm talking more about the structure of the storytelling because you have to tell a very very tight story. And you know, in 90 minutes you have to tell beginning, middle, and end. You have to take the audience on a journey. You got to take the character through an arc. You know, like you got to do it all in 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. So movie scripts are very tight. There's very little fat on a very good movie script. And so modeling your structure after that is very very nice, but you are writing a novel.
Right.
So of course you do what as just as movies do what is to the strengths of that medium, like camera work and bringing it in really really tight when you want people to feel claustrophobic, and bringing it way 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 out when you want people to feel isolated and things like that. Like there's a whole like language to visual storytelling in movies. There's an entirely different language to novels. So I'm mostly talking about story structure when I'm talking about, you know, modeling it after movies. I wanted to. We only have about 7 minutes left in the stream, so I wanted to hit a couple of questions really quickly. This was a good one. How do you combat imposter syndrome? Do you guys even still get that imposter syndrome? Adam, you first. How do you deal with that? How does it happen for you?
At this point, it's not really an issue. I mean, there are authors out there who are more successful than I am. There are authors out there who aren't as successful as I am. And, we all have stories to tell. I find my audience, they find their audience, and we're not in competition. Part of the imposter syndrome, I think, is thinking that, well, I have to be better than that person. No, not so much. Not so much. So I'm not, at this point, I'm not doing it. Not playing that game.
Yeah.
Lucky you. I am playing the game, but not about, am I going to be better than other authors? It's more about, is the message I'm trying to get through, especially because I'm writing for kids and finding the parents and teachers and people that have the nieces and nephews and people that I actually want to get my books in the hands of as an indie author who primarily markets my stuff online is hard. And so it's half like, how am I going to get people to read my books? Because I know kids are like, I know that they're going to like them if they read them, but how do I get them to read them? And the other half is the lesson that I want to get through to the readers going to come through without banging them over the head with a piece of plywood, which every book like has a lesson, obviously, but for me at least, because I'm writing for kids, that is the most important thing. And it's like I want them to have fun. I want it to be a good story. I don't want them to realize that they're learning something, but by the time they get to the end,
Mm-hmm.
I want them to get what I was hoping that they would get out of the book. And so for me, that's kind of where the imposter syndrome comes from. How I battle it, I don't have an answer for that one because I'm still figuring that out myself. I wish I had an answer for. But if you're talking about the typical kind where it's like compare yourself to other writers, I would just say write what you want to write what's important to you, write what's fun. The minute something stops being fun as you're doing the first draft, because after the first draft, it's a whole different ball game, in my opinion. But like as you're writing the first draft, it's just for you. The minute that stops being fun, stop working on it and do something else. Do something that is fun because if you're having fun, you won't compare yourself to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody tells you to write what you love to read or write what you love to write. Both of those are great, pieces of advice. Like if I've also heard that gem of if there's a book that you really, really want to read and it doesn't exist, then you're the one who's supposed to write it. And
Mm.
it's like one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I write in general, but this novel trilogy has been what I've been working on for the last 2 years now, and it's what I'll be working on for the next probably 4 years. And I love it. I feel like it's what I'm supposed to be writing, like what I'm supposed to be putting out there. We are drawing near to the end, my friends. So I'm just rounding out the chat here for everybody, making sure everybody has said their piece. I believe there's one or two questions that we didn't get to today, but I'll try and tackle them on the podcast because we are recording the podcast immediately after this. So those of you who, excuse me, so those of you who want to hear more from Mr. Adam Gaffin and Miss Claerie Kavanaugh, you can come back right here to this channel on Thursday when the video version of the podcast will premiere at 11 a.m. And there'll be a live chat as well. And if our guests today are able to join us that day, they might be in there. I'll certainly be in there. And we can watch the podcast together. Let's see here. Oh, yes, Nat, please come back. I saw you write earlier that you turned on notifications. That's what I'm talking about. Good stuff. I love my books and my characters I wrote. Yeah, it's there are babies. When I am writing, it is the only time I
Definitely.
feel like I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing. There you go. There you go. Great guest, great show. Thank you for the interviews. It was great. All right. Thank you guys so much for the rounds. I'm going to give each of you a minute here to say your goodbyes and tell people what you need them to know before they leave. So we're going to start with Miss Claerie Kavanaugh here. Why don't you go ahead and take it away?
I always seem to go first on these things. What's with that? Thank you guys so much
It's
for
just
joining me.
politeness.
If
That's all
you
it is.
have children or you know anyone who has children who likes middle grade fantasy fiction, all my links are down below. The newest book is just came out on September 13th, and the third book is on pre-order if you like fun stories. This one was particularly challenging because it involves a baking competition at a Christmas tree farm. So that was interesting to write. If you want to follow me and keep up with what I'm actually doing, be sure to follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, and my website and everything else is down below. Thank you again so much for having me on, Adrian.
All right. So, yes, again, thank you for having me. It's been a blast being here talking with you and with Claerie. Yeah, the website scrolling right there. Yeah. So that's a great place to go. You can find chapters of all the books. You can find audio samples from all the books. The first 4 books are all available on Audible as well as ebooks and paperback. And if you just really want to dive right in, the Cassidy Chronicles, I have an omnibus box set, which has all 5 novels, plus it'll have an exclusive novelette, which won't appear anywhere else. That is releasing in less than a week. It's releasing on the 23rd, which happens to be Ayanna Cassidy's birthday. Surprise, surprise, that's why I chose it. So go to the website, and thank you so much for asking questions. Look forward to hearing from more of you.
It was a pleasure to have you both on. Thank you guys so much for coming. To everybody in the chat, thank you for participating. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Please leave a like on the video. It helps us out. And why don't you go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section about your series, what you guys are writing out there, and let us know what to expect from you guys as writers. I am going to go ahead and say goodbye to my guests here. Guys, stick around. We're going to do the podcast in a minute. Just sit tight. And for everybody else, we will see you next Sunday for more Livestream Sunday, and this Thursday for more of Miss Claerie Kavanaugh and Adam Gaffen. Thank you very much, and we are going to be out.
It sound right, boys.